right off the top, quite an honor to sit here with two Ontario provincial police officers, Lynn and Rob. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you, Scott.
I'm excited to do this interview. We're at the Invisible Wounds Mental Wellness Seminar for Families. I know both of you love your families. I'm going to hit it right off the top here. Lynn, how has being a police officer for how many years?
I'm in my 21st year with the OPP, and I think I'm in my 16th year uniform. So I started civilian and now I'm in my 16th year uniform.
Wow. How does being a police officer affect your husband, your kids?
It's affected them from the beginning. And it's interesting because my husband encouraged me to pursue, even as a civilian. I had sort of stopped with having kids, deciding, well, maybe I'll just be happy with being in the comm center. And he's like, but your dream was to be a police officer, so why are you giving up on that? So lo and behold, I went forward with it. And as you know, my career started with before I was even done my first year, I was in a major car accident and nearly died. So, my kids were coming to see me in the hospital, and that was a bit traumatic. So from the beginning, my career has not been easy on my family. And they've been through thick and thin with me, and we've been through a lot. I was just sharing with somebody just a few minutes ago that the key for me, and I might be jumping ahead, but I make no bones about the fact I was diagnosed with PTSD. I finally sort of took some time off work to actually get healthy and heal. And my awakening sort of moment was when my daughter looked at me and went, "Mom, it's really happy to see you really smile again." And that was my moment where I went, wow, I didn't realize how affected they were by what I had been through and by what I was holding in and what I was dealing with. So yeah, they've been through, it's huge. Everything is about family. And if anybody who doesn't think it's not affecting their family is misleading themselves. And it's important that we recognize that.
I couldn't agree with you more, Lynn. Rob, I know that your family is near and dear to your heart. We've had several conversations about this.
Yes.
Same question for you. Has being a police officer affected your family?
Yes. I had children later in life. I got married later in life, sort of the last of all my buddies. But so a lot of the work that I did when I initially came on the job, dealing with, organized crime groups, a lot of motorcycle gangs, all that sort of stuff, and I'm really happy that at the time I didn't have a family for that type of work. And having said that, much of what you do throughout your life cascades forward and is always sort of with you, until dealt with. And so, having children and having daughters and being married, it does affect. And there's no way that you can do this job and sort of in a silo and not have that sort of bleed over into the family unit. And it's tough. And so a lot of those challenges, and I too don't want to get too far ahead of any questions, but certainly in 2015, I decided to rise to the challenge to put my name forward to become the next president of the OPP Association. And at that time, it was the largest police association in the country, and had gone through quite an upheaval. And many of the things that when I was elected, I found needed a lot of attention. And one of the areas was the mental health and well-being of our people. So through that, though, and what it sort of took to lead that organization and to earn the trust of the membership, it took everything I had, which, to your question, then takes away from the people that are closest to us. Mm-hmm. And while I was focusing on that, and the suicide crisis in the OPP and the mental health crisis in the OPP. My own personal health was degrading. And, and in 2018, after, successive years of dealing with officer suicides, I finally said, enough's enough in the summer of 2018. And for about a year and a half after that, I had this, I envisioned this sort of 24/7, 365 program, which we now know as Encompass, in response to the issues that we were dealing with. And I worked every day for the next year and a half, and once again, taking away from those that are closest to me, and ultimately entering into residential treatment for post-traumatic stress and complex PTSD.
Well, yeah. I thank you both for sharing your journeys. And, both, you're saying you got PTSD. So do I. 3 of us diagnosed with PTSD. This is going to lead me into my next question. For you, Lynn, both Lynn and Rob are directors at the OPP Association, which means you're a helper of other police officers and civilian members of the OPP when they're in crisis. And some of these crises, as Lynn has touched on, are life and death. You guys have your phones going off at all hours of the day and night. You're on call, basically, to help, whether it be a legal issue or whether it be a life and death issue. And how do you look after yourself, Lynn?
Fortunately, because I've been through my journey, I learned really early on that healthy boundaries are huge. And there's times where I let them go. And then you catch yourself. I mean, I make no bones about the fact I still see my psychologist. I still have my therapist that I go to on a regular basis, because regardless of how far in my journey I think I've gotten, there's always those things that are going to come back. And I call them bad habits. They're my helper habits but I put everything into it and I ignore all of my own stuff. So from the perspective of how do I stay healthy when I'm helping these people, it comes down to my joy, my reason for being here. I love my family, my kids. It's all about balance. And if I can't have that balance, it's not always even about always being with them, but what do I love? What do I find joy in? And that's the piece where I enjoy helping people, but there comes a point where I have to put me first and not think that it's selfish, or that it's even necessarily, even if you want to call it selfish, that it's wrong to be selfish. So from that perspective, I have to remind myself on occasion. I'll go down, as you know, we lost Greg Perchala. We didn't lose him. He was murdered. I was on call that day. I got the call. I was at the hospital. I dealt with the members, and that was really tough. And I poured my heart and soul into looking after everybody that was involved in that. And what I found coming out of that was I'd started to fall into old habits, and I went, okay, let's do that check-in and go, okay, where do I need to go? What do I need to do to make sure I'm looking after me? So shut the phone off for a little bit. Know that there are people out there other than me who can help, and take the time, explain it to my family, explain what's going on so that they understand why maybe I am how I am at that moment. But I think more importantly than ever, we have to have those healthy boundaries that we set and go, yes, I'm a helper, but I can't be everything to everyone else if I don't look after me. So we have to step back and go, okay, you know what? I love walking. I love being outside. I love riding my bike. If I let those things go because I'm so busy helping everybody else, then I'm not going to be healthy enough to help them. So that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but it's about making sure those things that bring you joy, those things that bring you happiness, even if it's just standing in the sunshine for 10 minutes and absorbing that and having some peace and some quiet. I'm an avoider, so I will be busy so that I don't have to deal with what's going on. So I force myself to. I force myself to have those quiet moments and go, no, everything's okay. Bring my breathing back. Do that. Those moments where you center yourself and go, okay, everything's going to be okay, and I can handle this.
I commend you for everything that you do, Lynn, and you too, Rob. That brings me to this whole Encompass mental health wellness program that the OPP Association started. It's over 3 years old. Rob alluded to the fact that he pretty much broke himself doing this, and you were the president, but now you're back as a director. I'm like, Rob, go look after yourself. You are looking after yourself. And I think I want to know, I know this Encompass mental health wellness program is really near and dear to your heart.
Yes.
Can you just explain what it is, how it works, and how somebody maybe like Lynn that's like recognizing some symptoms can reach out?
Yeah, so as I was speaking about earlier, is in response to the suicide crisis that we were facing and the mental health crisis that we were facing, it really came to a culmination in the summer of 2018. And I remember I was in Ottawa and I had received the news, and it was at that point where the board of directors of the day, I said to them, I really want to write a letter to the membership to say, we need to deal with this. We really need to deal with this, not just in a mile wide and an inch deep way. We need to really come up with something. And I remember going back to my office in Barrie and closing the door and sitting there with a piece of paper and saying, what is this program? What do we need? And I had been to numerous funerals. I was talking with numerous widows and their families of those whose partners and husbands had died by suicide. And I really listened to them. I listened to the members. I listened to myself because I was off in 2013 to 14 for a short period of time. And I thought, what is it that I needed, my wife needed, my daughters needed? And it just wasn't available. And then when I was elected president in 2015, we had caps in place at that time for psychological treatment. So it was $1,500 a year at $50 a half hour. And then we raised it to $3,500 a year and $75 a half hour. But it was such an evolutionary conversation at that time. We've learned so much in the last, it's very been front of mind in the last few years, that those barriers, those financial caps create psychological barriers and financial barriers for those people that are seeking treatment. And that is not how we deal with this. So in culmination with that in 2019, just sort of prior to the release of this, we negotiated unlimited psychological supports and unlimited WSIB. And what that did was just blew away all the barriers and allowed people to have access to the treatment that they required. But what was really important was we knew it needed to be 24/7, 365. So I sat there with this piece of paper and I said to myself, let's just pretend that money, and I sort of have alluded this to a couple of times when people have asked me, let's just take money out of the equation and let's design the most integrated and comprehensive mental health program anywhere of its kind. What would it look like? 24/7, 365, bilingual, because we have many of our members and families are French language speaking, is their primary language. Cultural. So the two pieces on culture, the culture of the OPP and the culture of people, and sort of blending it all together with residential treatment options, and really just making it a one-stop shop. But the biggest piece on Encompass, and what was the most, and I got this from one of the widows when I spoke to her at her husband's funeral, and there was this pause, there was this hesitation, there was this, I didn't know what to kind of do next thing. This was happening, and it was that hesitation that I said, this has to stop. And by having someone who's trained on the other end, such as the folks from Dalton Associates, it becomes a concierge. And the way that when we went through the RFP process to hire someone to take on the role of administering Encompass, I said, I don't know how you write this, but when someone calls in, I want you to wrap your arms around them and never let them go, right? And then immediately with the resources we had, we joined with the Ontario Psychological Association as well. So we had sort of unlimited access. So you've got that diverse pool of clinicians in and outside of the OPA. And then you've also got, the culture of policing, specifically the OPP, which is understood, blending it all together. And quite honestly, when I left at the end of 2020, and I stayed in touch, and I was, even though I was off of work and, getting healthy with complex PTSD, eventually returning and understanding the 3-year mark, we're over 2,500 members and their families is, it's been worth it. It was very difficult to do all this. I had a great group of people around me that were able to take a vision, an idea that I had, but I give the credit to the widows and their families and people who inspired me to operationalize this and with our team and to create the most integrated and comprehensive mental health program for first responders pretty much anywhere.
Congratulations. 24/7, even in a crisis, you can reach out to the Encompass Mental Health Wellness Program if you're an OPPA member or a family member there. And I know a lot of family members are using it. So we're on the theme of families here. Lynn, we've had a few discussions here with other people that we've been interviewing, and a common theme that comes up is, what are the symptoms in my spouse that I'm seeing, and how do I address it with them? How do I suggest to them that they maybe need some help or something like that? What's your best advice for a spouse out there of a police officer? Being a woman, being a police officer, I know you've been through a line of duty death in that car crash. You got a lot of experience.
It's such a complex question what you ask, because not any one of us is ever the same, and our relationship with our spouse isn't the same. It came down for me to my husband looking at me and going, "So is it all lip service?" And I went, "What are you talking about?" He said, "All these people that you help, you tell them it takes more strength to come forward and ask for help." And he says, "But you stand here not doing it. So did you mean it, or was it just lip service?" And that was my wake-up call, that I was so afraid. I was afraid of, not being able to get promoted, of this being, stymieing my career. And those are all the complex things that goes into anyone who wants to step up and go, "I need help." So as a spouse or a partner, I think you really have to look at your relationship, look at the changes that you see. So if you see somebody, and I was one of those people, I was always the happy person who, I was the cheerful one. And then all of a sudden I'm not, and I'm angry, and I'm, short and disengaged. Those are symptoms, hopefully they don't get that close, but it's one thing for somebody to come home and need 5 minutes, depending on, how close you live to home and that kind of thing. But if your spouse is on the couch and doing nothing but channel surfing, they've disengaged. They're not there, and there's something going on, and it's okay. Maybe you need help broaching the subject with them, because we lash out at the people closest to us, right? Like, it's because we know they're going to be there for us typically anyway, but I'm fine. Really? Because you just bit my head off. That's not fine. Now, I have a whole different version of fine. Freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional is my version of fine. If I say fine, there's a problem. But don't be afraid to have the conversation, because I think the acceptance that it's okay, that that's normal, we have to stop accepting that changes in behavior is normal. And we actually have to be willing to look at your spouse. My husband was willing to look at me and go, you're not fine. well, or in my definition, I was fine, freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. But nothing is worth your mental health. Nothing is worth putting your family through that. So have the courage. It might not be an easy conversation. It might be something you have to leave them with. But I think don't do it when you're angry, right? Because that's when the things come up. For me, if I had to say to any of the spouses, do it at a time when everybody's calm, there's no crisis. And then you go, I see you, I hear you. Are you sure? Are you sure you're okay? Maybe we need to talk to somebody. I encourage everybody who starts in this profession anymore, get your baseline, especially with our organization now, Unlimited Psychological, as Rob said, go get your baseline when you start, because the professionals will tell you when things are changing. But don't be afraid to have the conversation. Don't accept that this is just how it is now. It's not, and it can be better.
Very wise advice, Lynn. Rob, we're getting near the end of the interview here. And I know that I could talk with both of you for hours and hours and hours. Moving forward with all this mental health stuff, we see so many people trying to do a lot for first responders out there. And you've accomplished a lot, as we've heard. The going forward of this, what do you feel needs to be done in the first responder world to properly address things moving forward? When we're long retired, what should the people in your roles as directors of police associations be doing?
Well, that's a great question. And I think it really varies service by service, but I think there's a lot of similarities when you talk to our colleagues in other police associations with some of the challenges that they face. I think stigma is still very much present. And I think the reduction and the elimination needs to still continue to be our goal. What I also like to see, and I think what needs to happen more and more, is conversations like this, where we're normalizing the conversation, if that's the way to say it, around mental health. It's not, when I came on in 1995 in the OPP, we did not talk like this. We did not talk like this 5 years ago. So at the end of the day, what I'm hearing in the workplaces now, and you've probably heard it as well, Lynn, no doubt, is just more people saying, at 2:00, I've got my psychologist appointment, or I've got my clinician appointment, and I'm, there's more it's just sort of a normal thing. And so it's really encouraging to see that. I think we still need strong leadership within the service and within the associations to continue to normalize those conversations and to support our people. I think we still have quite a few people across the province in each service that continue to go off of work, for mental health reasons, for us just to sort of speak generically. I think we need to start, and we need to continue to ask, why? Why is this happening? And really drilling down on why is this person not remaining within the workplace? What's happening? And so then we get into the conversations around sanctuary trauma and moral injury. And I think there's the things that we experience, this is my own opinion from my own observations, there's the things that we experience day to day as police officers and civilians of law enforcement that subject us to either vicarious or direct trauma. And that affects us. There's no question about that. And I think that's well sort of accepted. I think the questions around sanctuary trauma and the behaviors of people within an organization, we can have some great people. And we're fortunate that we have, and I just call it as I see it, the commissioner of the OPP right now, Tom Carrique. I think he's excellent. I think when it comes to the, I was president when he came over as commissioner, and we worked very closely together, and his intentions, specifically around the mental health and well-being of our people, he's, through his leadership and the collaboration of others, I think it takes someone like that in these positions on the service side to really drive those points home. But I think we still need to continue to ask why. And I think we also need to, when we ask why, and I've said this now for a while, and I'm still having these conversations, we need to ask some of the clinicians of the people that treat our people, what are you seeing? What are the themes that you're seeing, because you're treating our people? And I think taking that information and going back and saying, listen, whether it's the return to work, whether it's the use of force, whether it's issues around stigma within the workplace, what are some of the issues? And so I think that's some of the areas where we need to roll up our sleeves and continue to figure out what is causing some of the harm within our membership. And then as an association and as anybody that's employed with an organization, we all have a responsibility to be part of the solution and not be part of the problem.
I agree. Listen to the professionals. Great advice, Rob.
Yeah.
Last question. Thank you both for being here today. Last question to you, Lynn. This is going to be probably the toughest of the day. This is going to be seen on TV. You know, you've got a 10-year-old or maybe a teenager watching this, and their mother or father or maybe both are first responders. Police officers, paramedics, fire department, military, nurses, you know, anybody on the front lines, and they see these symptoms in their parents. What's your advice for that young child?
Yeah, you don't make it easy, do you? Don't hide from your parents and tell them how you feel. We love our kids. And, you know, to my first point of my daughter was my wake-up call to just how much I had changed, and didn't recognize it in myself. So I think if you see it in your parents, if you see them not engaging with you, there's nothing wrong with saying, I miss that you used to throw the ball around with me. I miss you used to come on all my field trips with me. I miss you coming to my games and watching, or my dance or gymnast, whatever it is, that if you're seeing that person not, that parent not do that with you anymore, tell them. Don't accept it. You don't have to accept it. They need to know what it means to you, because it probably means just as much to them and they don't even see it themselves.
Excellent advice. I can't thank Rob enough for what you've done. Lynn, for sharing all this. You continue to help everybody day in and day out. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.